Beginning our Daf Mesech Yevamos Daf Ayin Test, begin 15 lines down at the top of the Yomit, where the Gemara continues the discussion of the previous Daf regarding the Gevonim / the Nesinim, who we had spoken about in our previous Mishnah that they're Aser, Isur and Isur Oilam to come into the Kilech, it's the Charim Mekevus. The Gemara was given the historical background for when was it that it became forbidden to marry into the Jewish people. Sure, corresponds because of the Cheskel turns in the Dafachem B'Shem today's Daf. Some of the things discussed in today's Daf are, as we mentioned, the Gemara will discuss the story with the Nesinim. Again, there were the Gevonim, they were called Nesinim because the Pasuk says Yitnim, that they were placed to be used as the wood choppers and the water carriers, but then the killing of 7 of Shaul HaMelech's descendants. We discussed regarding that Moshe, Yeshua, and David all decreed against the Nesinim becoming part of the column. What did each one introduce that the previous one had not already made? Stris Adam and Stris Chama. In the context of our Gemara, Stris Adam means someone became a Stris after birth, and Stris Chama is that a Stris from birth. So as we mentioned previous time, the Gemara continues the story which was David enough to prohibit the Nesinim from hanging the Kalai Yisrael. The Nesinim requested 7 of Shaul's sons to be hanged. David tried to appease them, they didn't relent, and David said, the Jewish people are Rachmanim, like it says in the Pasuk, they're by Shanim, like it says, when they give them chasad, like it says, and since David HaMelech continued, he says, since they don't have the midah of Rachmanis, the Gevonim, they're not worthy to become part of Klal Yisrael, so therefore, David HaMelech made a gezerah that they shouldn't marry into the Jewish people. Today's there's all discussion. What was it? Was it Isser Chasnas? Was it that they made them in Tavodim? But be that as they made, they weren't able to marry into Klal Yisrael. But that's our Gemara continues and says that since David couldn't appease them, so he actually handed over 7 of Shaul's descendants, and the Gevonim killed them by hanging. As the Gemara says, 15 lines down at the top of the Yomit, says the Pasuk, V'yikach HaMelech. This is a middle of the discussion from the top of the Yomit, the Pasuk in Shmuel Beis. So the king took, this again because there was a famine, and Hashem had told him that was because of the Gevonim, and they said, fine, only if you give us 7 of Shaul's descendants. So the king took a Shnei Bnei Ritzpah, Bas Aya, 2 sons of Ritzpah, the daughter of Aya, Asher Yolad Shaul, which she gave birth to Shaul, Esar Moini Ves Mephibosheth. Today's discusses the famous Mephibosheth, the teacher of David, who he was regarding Ishbosheth. Ves Chameshes Bnei Michal Bas Shaul. We know another daughter of Shaul was Michal, and her 5 sons, which Asher Yoldo Adriel ben Barzila HaMachalasi, that was her husband. So 2 plus 5, these were 7 of the descendants of Shaul HaMelech. Says Gemara, Ma'ishna Hani. Why specifically these 7 descendants did David HaMelech give to be executed? So Mafundi says what he did was Hevim Lefnei Aaron. David HaMelech passed these descendants of Shaul in front of the Aaron. Kol Sha'aron Kol Toi, who whichever one the Aaron held on to, Lamisa, was to be hung. Kol She'ein Aaron Kol Toi, whichever one the Aaron did not hold on to, L'chaim, would live. Problem is, Moshe Rav Chana bar Katina asks, the pasuk says, "V'yachval HaMelech HaMephibosheth ben Yohanan ben Shaul," that the king had compassion on Mephibosheth, the son of Yohanan, the son of Shaul. Now, if it was dependent on the Aaron, so since the Aaron did not contain him, what was it that David had compassion on him? Says the Gemara, because he didn't pass him by the Aaron. That's how he was able to save this Mephibosheth. Says the Gemara, is there some type of favoritism over here? What, David HaMelech is going to show favoritism regarding capital punishment? He should have passed them all through. Says the Gemara, what happened was that he did pass him by, and the Aaron did contain him. Then he beseeched mercy, and then the Aaron spit him out. He didn't hold on to him. Says, is there still favoritism? In other words, since the Aaron contained him, he shouldn't now daven for him to be released and to have someone else, because we knew 7 of the descendants were going to die. Now because he was let go, someone else is going to have to die in his place. Ella rather says Gemara, he davened that the Aaron should not even contain him in the first place. Meaning, once he was contained, to take him out, someone's going to have to take his place. Although someone's going to take his place now, but he was never contained in the first place, he davened that the Aaron should not contain him. Now the Gemara says in general a difficulty. But the pasuk says in the Varim, "La yumsu aves albanim begoyim." that the fathers don't die because of the sons, etc. And the pasuk continues, "L'yumsu al avos," that avanim l'yumsu al avos, that the sons don't die for the fathers. Ish becheto yumasu, which is really the main part of the question, which is every man dies for his own sin. So how could you have 7 descendants of Shaul dying because Shaul killed out Noiger Kahanim and therefore the Gevonim didn't have food to provide for themselves? But what sins did the Eniklach do that they should die because of Shaul HaMelech? So Rabbi Chiya bar Abba says, "Mutiv shiti akar is achas min haTorah." Better that it should be uprooted one letter from the Torah, meaning we know that one letter is missing, the whole Sefer Torah is possible. Better be uprooted by Yisrael Shem Shemaim V'Hesed, and should not be a desecration of God's name out in the open, because the nations are going to say it's not appropriate to connect with the Jewish people, because they extended their hands against converts to take away their sustenance, because Nevi Kahanim are the ones who provided the food and the water for the Gevonim, and Shaul HaMelech killed them out, and no one took revenge, even though it affected the Gerim. So it would be a great chilul shem shemayim if we didn't do something to take revenge for the Gevonim. So even though, yes, it's going against what the Torah says, ish bechetu yimosu, better let there be an ice ripped out from the Torah, and that it shouldn't be a chilul shem shemayim b'hased. Similarly, the Gemara asks from another pasuk. It says in the narrative, it says, "V'tikach Ritzpa bas Aya." This Ritzpa, the daughter of Aya, who she lost 2 children in this story, she took as a sack the sack cloth, but tateu lo elatzur, and she spread out to the rock, which Taisus brings from the Medrash that to the rock means that she did siduk hadin, and she said hatsur tam and pa'alei. Be that as it may, she took the sack and she stretched it out to the rock mitchilas kitzir, from the beginning of the harvest ad nasach mayim aleim l'shmayim, until the water poured down from the heaven, meaning until the winter months. These 7 children, these 7 people, were not given to be burial, but that didn't allow for the birds of the heaven to rest on them during the daytime. And the wild animals at nighttime. The problem is, how could these bodies have been hanging there all this time? You're not allowed to leave overnight his dead body on the piece of wood when he's hanging. You can't leave him there overnight. So Rabbi Tzaddik, he says, yes, better let there be one letter ripped out from the Torah, and it should sanctify God's name out in the open. Because the Gemara explains, passerbys would say, Mativ and Shalelu, what's going on over here? What are these people that are hanging over here? He says, Halalu b'nei malachim, these are princes. So what do? They stretched out their hand to affect in a negative way lowly converts, because they weren't even regular Gerim. They Gevonim, they were wood choppers and water carriers. Some they said, there's no nation that's more appropriate to connect oneself than this nation. If this was what was done to princes, how much more so would have been punished if they would have been just regular people. And if lowly converts, that they're taking revenge for them, Yisrael become of a regular Jew, how much more so they would have done the punishment. And immediately they increased upon the Jewish people 150,000 converts. Shlomo says the pasuk Lochem Aleph, that was for Shlomo Shivim Elef Neisisav. He had 70,000 who would carry the loads. And they had 80,000 that went and carved out in the mountain. Says the Gemara, but maybe these are regular Jews. How do you know that these were the converts that joined the Jewish people? Says the Gemara, let's take a day. You cannot entertain this because the Simon says the pasuk Lochem Aleph. It says the Bnei Yisrael and Nasr Shlomo Avid. From the Jewish people, Shlomo did not make them into servants. So obviously, that these people that were 150,000 doing this work were obviously these Gerim. Says but how do you know? But maybe they were hired workers. Or Tay says the Gear says doing gar, which is a terminology also of a hired labor, because doing means a term of measuring, and gar is also the work. So well, either way, maybe they were just workers. How do you know that? You're right, he didn't make them into avadim, but maybe they were paying them. Says the right. The source is from a pasuk Daf Yomi Beis. The Yisper Shleima Kol Anoshim Hagerim asher be'eretz Yisrael b'goyim, that Shloimy counted all the people that were the Gerim, that were in Eretz Yisrael, etc. V'yimatzu mei v'chamishim elef v'goyim, and they found them to be 150,000. And v'yas mehem shivim elef savel. He made from them 70,000 who carried loads of Shemanim elef chaytz of Bahar, and 80,000 that carved at the mountain, because it was such a kiddush Shem Shemayim that people saw what they did, that they were hanging. They said, oh, so there's no greater people than this. But now the Gemara asks, the whole understanding of how we explain the narrative from the previous daf, says David Gazalim, like we said this whole story that they weren't Rachmanim, so David Amel said they're not appropriate to fit the Jewish people, so he was Geyser. Again, however Tais explains the Gezer actually was, but he was Geyser, he shouldn't marry in. But Moshe Gazalim, Moshe Bein made the Gezer. There's something that said Bas in the Barn. It says in Parshat Nitzav, Mechaiti b'tzechad shayv memecha, from your wood choppers until your water carriers. Now, as Rashi points out, from the fact that they were called wood choppers independently, obviously, they're not part of the Jewish people, because it already said Kol B'nai Yisrael. And obviously they're not including Gerim, they're rather like Avadim, and Avadim Psulim. And the Gevainim were wood choppers, where that's what Yeshua had designated them for. So, if that's the case, we already know Moshe Rabbeinu were geyser on them. Says Gemara, yeah, Moshe goes lahu dara. Moshe Rabbeinu made the gezer for that generation that they should be wood choppers in his days. David goes l'kuli David. David Amelch made for all future generations. Says Gemara, yeah, but Vakati Yeshua goes alive. Forget about Moshe Rabbeinu. Yeshua already made the gezer. That's somebody says the person in Yeshua. So the Yitim Yeshua b'yemahu, Yeshua gave on that day chayt ve'etzim v'shei v'mayim, wood choppers and water carriers la'eda for the people, u'mizbach Hashem, and for the mizbeach of Hashem. So obviously they were avodim, and Yeshua was for all future generations being geyser, because the pasuk says in Yeshua test, le'yichres michem chayt ve'etzim, will never be removed from you the wood choppers. So if that's the case, you already Yeshua did it. Says the Gemara, Yeshua gazal bezman shebeis hamikdash kayim. Yeshua will geyser in the times when the Beis Hamikdash was around, like it says over there, Mizbach Hashem. David geyser bezman she'in Beis Hamikdash kayim. David was geyser even when there is no Beis Hamikdash around. Now we continue to the Beis. The Gemara says that the main Rebbe in the days of Yehuda Nasi bikshu lahat nesinim. He wanted to permit the Nesinim to become part of the Jewish people. Their avodim. So Taisa says that it's not considered being mavatal divrei bezdin chaver. David Amelch was already great of all future times. How could in the days of Yehuda Nasi they were mavatal that? Because of hefker bezdin hefker, meaning it was an element of that the Jewish people owned them as avodim. That's okay because the bezdin could be mafker the avdish shaboy, and therefore it's not really being mavatal the decree. It's just nullifying the monetary ownership of every Jew in these avodim, and therefore then they're not avodim anymore. So it's like a shiur that they would have. But Olam Rabbi said, no, it's not going to work. It can't be matav in the scene because chalkenu nata. You're right. Our portion, we could permit, like Rashi says the same svara, because the courts could permit and be mafker the portions of the Jewish people, like the Gemara tells later on, Peites and Peites, Hefker, Bez, Nefker. Bezdin could declare ownerless anyone's money that they want to. The problem is, chelik mizbeach miyater, but what's with the portion of the mizbeach? We don't have any rights over chelik gevaya, over the mizbeach, and therefore, it's not going to work to permit them because they're still going to be considered avodim because they're still being owned by the mizbeach. Now, this that Rabbi Yehuda Anasi was saying that the chelik mizbeach, who's going to permit it, even though there was no mizbeach in the days of Rabbi, and he was saying still the chelik mizbeach is going to be usher, says the Gemara, plead Rabbi Chibur Abba. But that disagrees with Rabbi Chibur Abba. Because Rabbi Chibur Abba, he says chelik eida la'ilam usher, meaning on its own, the portion of the Jewish people will always be forbidden until they would permit it. But chelik mizbeach, the portion of the altar, is much of Beis Hamikdash kayim masa, when the Beis Hamikdash around is forbidden. In Beis Hamikdash kayim, sure, if there's no Beis Hamikdash, there's no chelik mizbeach, then it's permitted. Obviously, he held that if they were permitted, they would be permitted. Not like Rebbe who says it's not going to help to permit it because we can permit ours, but we cannot permit mizbeach. He held that obviously that was forbidden even though the Hamikdash is not around. Now going back to the halacha of the prior Mishnah, which is that of the Pitzur Daka, regarding that of the halachas of Yibam, except for the halacha of Kahal, which we were introducing about who's forbidden, who's permitted to the Kilim, going back as it relates to the mitzvah of Yibam. Amr Yeshua, Shemati, I heard, Shasadas Chaylet, a sadas, a eunuch, someone who cannot have children, who has a psul in his reproductive organ, he does chalitza, and the chaltza ne'eshtei, and when he dies, they do chalitza to his wife. But I also heard Vasaris loy chaylet, that he does not do chalitza, and and you don't do chalitza to his wife. Now the reason why you wouldn't do chalitza to his wife is because the pasuk says lo yimachar shemaim Yisrael. The reason why the brother does yibum to the widow is that the name of that late husband's name should not be erased. Saras, his name is always erased because he cannot have children. So you don't do chalitza to his wife. But be that as it may, says Rabbi Shloimy, but in Lefarish, I don't know how to explain it. I don't know which Saras you do chalitza, and which one is pater from chalitza. So actually, the Mishnah brings it as a machlekes how to interpret this teaching. Rabbi Kiva says, on the Lefarish, I'm going to explain. So this Adam, Saras who became by, again in our context we're translating as after birth, he wasn't born like that, so chaylet, he could do chalitza. Now obviously he cannot do yibum, because he would be included in the category of a petua daka if especially it means that some type of mutilation happened to his male organ, but he does chalitza, and and you do chalitza to his wife, which as Taisa explains, and as we'll see, that truth is that you could even do yibum to his wife, which really seems smaller why you do chalitza. The Gemara will explain why we're picking the words cholton, but because he had an opportune time of having children. This happened after he was born. At one point he was virile, he had the ability of having children. Later on became sterile. So that will not disqualify the halacha of yibum and chalitza applying to this saras of, and that goes for him doing chalitza and for his brother doing chalitza to his wife. Shres chama, someone who was born like this from the womb, it's congenital. Loy chaylet, he doesn't do chalitza, but he don't do chalitza to his wife. Why? He never had an opportune time, and therefore he's not considered as someone that we need to maintain his name, or him maintaining his brother's name. He never had the shasa kodesh. Rabbi Lezer says loiki. No, he disagrees. He says the opposite. Ella, rather, srischama, if he was born like that, he does chalitza and they do chalitza to his wife. And here also the truth is they would even do yibum to his wife because he's also not a petzua daka. So there wouldn't be any problem about even doing yibum. Now, why? Nishesh later for, because the svara he says is because someone who's born like this could be healed. A Swiss Adam, on the other hand, if let's say he was mutilated, then then he doesn't do chalitza, they don't do chalitza his wife, because there's no healing such a thing. If it was a condition that the child was born with, then you could heal, but this was with some type of a human element, that cannot be healed. Says the Mishnah, hey, Rabbi Yeshua ben Meseira al ben Magusis. Yeshua ben Meseira testified there was an individual ben Magusis Shoy B'Yerushalayim. He was a Sris Adam, and the Yibmu es Ishta, and they did Yibum to his wife.
That's involved in chalitza.
Right, and we'll see in the Gemara exactly that point, that it would be allowed to be done even Yibum. And this testimony Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg testified was the kind of Rabbi Kiva. Again, because the machlek is who's the one that you do chalitza, which, as you just pointed out, even Yibum, was it the Sris Adam, the Sris, or the Sris Chama? You see that he was coming to support the Rabbi Kiva, who said that the one that we do chalitza to, and maybe even Yibum, is the Sris Adam, because, like he said, that he had a shasa klesha. Now, concluding this idea, says the Mishnah, whichever opinion it is, Hasadas, loy chaylet v'lo miyam. He cannot do chalitza, and he doesn't do yibum. Again, whichever opinion it is, because the purpose is that is shloy macha shmai. That excludes a saras. That his name is macha. It's lahakim shem, and the saris cannot do that. So therefore, he doesn't do chalitza and he doesn't do yibum. So too the islandness, which is the female version of being sterile, not being able to have children. You don't do chalitza with her, and you don't do yibum with her, because again the pasuk says asher telin, which asher telin says probably islandness because she cannot have children. Now, therefore, the Gemara makes the following ramification of what we just said. Hasaris shachalets livinter. So if the saris does do chalitza to his yevama, like pasla, he doesn't invalidate it from kahuna, which although we know a chalutza, like a grusha, cannot marry a kohen, his chalitza is not a chalitza. Like we said, he's not in the category of chalitza. Now, Bala, if he has bia with her, then psala, then he does invalidate her. Nishi bia laznus, because it's a bia of licentiousness, because he's forbidden to her because of Eichashach Shalei B'Makam Mitzvah. Even though he's a brother, but it's only if he could have a child. But since he cannot be lahakav la'ach of shame because he's a sis, so actually it's a bia psula, which would then make it a bia of znus, like that of a chiyav of misa. As a Eichashach Shalei B'Makam Mitzvah would make her into a zayna. The same thing is regarding the other case we said. There's an alnus that the brothers do chalitza to her. They don't invalidate it from good. It doesn't make her into chalitza because she's an alnus. Alnus is in chalitza. But if they do be with her, they invalidate her. She lost bilas because again, there it's considered Eishav Shalem Magam mitzvah because she's an alnus. So again, if they had bia, they wouldn't perform the mitzvah. Even if anything, actually, would make her into a psula. Says the Gemara, Mechti. The Gemara asks, let's see. Shamin Rabbi Kiva the Amar. We know Rabbi Kiva says, Chiva Lavin, that when there's a negative prohibition, he holds is kechiva krisidam. What's this referring to? So this is referring to Rabbi Kiva we had in Perek Achilles of Testament Aleph. Kiva held, we mentioned many times, something called a mamzer. A mamzer is someone who's an illegitimate child. Now, from what type of union do you make an illegitimate child? So there's a machlekes of Tanoim, either chiva misas bezdin, chiva krisis. Kiva holds, even from chiva lavin, a negative prohibition would make a mamzer. Now, a sris adam, someone who is castrated, someone who became a sris through a human intervention, is from chiva lavin. It says in the Torah, that there shouldn't come a b'tzudaka into your people. And the chiva krisis is labane chalitza v'yibninu. As we established in the beginning of this mesechta, that if anything that is karas, they're not in the category of yibn chalitza at all. So the question is, how could Rabbi Kiva say in our Mishnah that this Adam, the halacha is chalitz and uchaltzin le'ishtoi, that he does chalitza to his brother's wife? What do you mean? There's no zika to him. She's in the outside like a chiva krisis. There's a chiva lav over here because he's a petzuadaka. So if there's a chiva lavin, chiva lavin is like chiva krisis, which means just like chiva krisis, we know we established in the beginning of this mesechta, there's no mitzvah yibum, and it's a isha ach shalei b'mokam mitzvah. So chiva lavin is the same thing also. So how could Rabbi Kiva say that he could do chalitza because who cares? He should be loy chalitz. He's including the lav of loyava betzuadaka b'krishav b'kal Hashem, and Rabbi Kiva holds chiva lavin kichiva krisis, and chiva krisis lavin echalitz v'yibnu. So it's the same thing as chiva krisis. So the Gemara attempts a few approaches to answer the question. Amr Abba says, "Of my skin, what are you talking about?" His brother who passed away had married a Giyaris. Okay, so therefore what? She's a regular Jewess. Yeah, but Rabbi Kiva Sabalog Rabbi Yosi. That what? Adama, he says, Kal Game like Kal. The Isab B'tzudaka to marry into the Kehillah, it does not include Game, because Game are not considered part of the Kehillah of the Jewish people. They're Jewish, but not part of the Kehillah. So yes, a Sris Adam is a B'tzudaka, but he could still do Chalitza because, like we said, he had a Shasa Kosher, and so it's not a problem, L'hakim L'ach of shame. But still he's not married to the Kehillah. That woman's not a Kehillah, that Amana is a gay Yaris, and there's no problem about the Chivalav, there's no Chivalav for this woman. Says the Gemara, that's the case, so what do you mean? Why you tell me that this Adam could do Chalitza? Forget about Chalitza, that in the parasha of Chalitza, you could even do Yibum. Why can't you do Yibum then? So the Gemara says, you're right. According to Rabbi Kiva, you'd be able to do Yibum. But Rabbi Shua, since Rabbi Shua, when Rabbi Shua said the statement, Rabbi Shua said, I heard, this is Cholz, I heard, since Rabbi Shua said, Chayletz, now, says Rashi, according to Rabbi Shua, he couldn't say you do Yibum. Why? Because Rabbi Shua holds Kahal Gerim is called Kahal. So even if Rabbi Shua's teaching was going like Rabbi Kiva, he still wouldn't be able to say you do Yibum because it's a Chiv Alav. even if chiv alav is not like chiv creases, chiv alav you can't go ahead and do yibum. But he says you do chalitza because chiv alav according to Yeshua do have chalitza because it doesn't hold like Rabbi Kiva that chiv alav is chiv creases. So I mean you're not chalitza. So Rabbi Kiva, when he was coming to explain the teaching of Yeshua, he kept the same words as Rabbi Yeshua. But of course, according to Rabbi Kiva, his interpretation would allow you even to do Yibum. That's something about Dekinami. Besides reading about Mishnah indicates that according to Rabbi Kiva, as was pointed out before, would even allow you to do Yibum. Because they tell me how Mishnah said later on, says, hey, Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg testified, Al Ben Magusas, this individual Ben Magusas, Shal Yibir Yushav Yuzin Yerushalayim, Sidis Adam, the Yibmu es Ishtoi, and they did Yibum to his wife, like Kaim did Rabbi Kiva. Now, although this is not going on the Sris Adam doing the Chalitza, it was on them doing Chalitza to his wife, but you see that the words Chalitz v'Cholzin was Lav Davka. We see that they even allowed them to do Yibum to his wife. Obviously, when Rabbi Kiva was saying Choltz v'Cholzin was Lav Davka, and just like to his widow, they could even do Yibum, he also could do Yibum because it was a Giyeris. And there's no Issa B'Tzuadaka, Love B'Kal Hashem, when there's a Giyeris. So the Sris Adam, since he had a Shas HaKosher, could even do Yibum. Problem is Masav Rabbi. Rabbi asked on this answer, according to this approach, the halacha of Sris Adam doing Chalitza is obviously only for Giyeris. Because if she's a regular Israelis, this is Issa B'Tzuadaka, Love B'Kal Hashem. If he holds that a Chiva Lavin is like Chiva Krisis, then you wouldn't have even Chalitza. So obviously the whole teretz is only working for Rabbi Kiva if she's a Geras. Problem is from the following brisa. The brisa says, Petsuah Daka, that if someone has crushed testicles, or if his male organ is cut, Sris Adam, a person that is a Saris, later on after he was born. Now, as Rashi points out, this is going to be Kiva, because since he had a Shas HaKosher, like explained in the Mishnah, so you can have the following halacha, that he is a Bar Chalitza and Yibum. V'azakan, an elderly person, the reason why we're picking an elderly person with these other ones is because it's similar that he also had a Shas HaKosher, he's just now old, so he doesn't have any virility. He's not able to have a child, but he once had a Shas HaKosher. So all these cases of these individuals, they either do Chalitza or Yibum. Ketzar also. So it works both ways, says the Brisa. Mesu, if these men died that we just counted, V'lehem Nashim, V'lehem Achim, and they had wives and they had brothers, V'amdu Achim, V'asu Maimer ben Nashasem, and then their brothers went and did a Maimer in their wives, or us together, they gave a get, or Shechalto, they did Chalitza, Masha Asasu. What they did was done, and they would need a get for the Maimer, or if they gave a get, they would be forbidden to do Yibum, and Bimbalu Kama, and if they did Biyah, they acquired the widows of these men. Now let's say the other way around. Let's say Mesu Achan. Let's say the brothers of these individuals died. And they, meaning the Tzudaka, the Krishafta, the Sris Adam, the Zakan, if they get up, then they do Maimer in the wives of their brothers, or Benastu Get, or they give a get, or they do Chalitza. Masha Asu Asu. What was done is done. The Balukan, if they do Biyah, they acquire. But if they did Biyah, Vaslakaiman, they're not allowed to maintain that Yibum, which Rashi says that's not going on the Zakan, because he by him there's no Isser. But regarding the Petzuadaka, the Kureshafcha, and the Sris, they cannot maintain that Yibum. Why? Because Torah says Lo Yom Petzuadaka Kureshafcha B'Kal Hashem, which all these three individuals, the Saris and the Petzuadaka and the Kureshafcha, are all included in that pasuk that they're not allowed to marry B'Kal Hashem. Problem is, says the Gemara, Alma says Rabbi, you see from the Brisa that Bekahal Askinon, you see that we're talking about a regular woman. How do I see you talking about a regular woman? Not by a Giyaris, because you're telling me that if this Petzuadaka, if this Krishavcha, if this Saras Adam does Yibum, okay, Kanu, but you're not allowed to maintain that. Why not maintain it? If she's a Giyaris, of course, you're allowed to even do Yibum. Oh, obviously. And we pointed out that this price is going like a Kiva because it's mentioning Saras Adam. So it's going like Rabbi Kiva, and you see Rabbi Kiva's halacha is even by a chiv alav. You see that it's talking about a regular woman. Well, then we're back to the question. Rabbi Kiva, l'shita says chiv alav is like chiv krisis. How are you telling me that you could even do chalitza, let alone yibum, if there's a chiv alav, of petuadaka, of siras adam, of kershavcha? How could you be doing? And it's not like, and we had answered, oh, she's a giyaris, so there's no chiv alav even. It's not true. If she was a giyaris, then if you did B, you would be allowed to stay married. There's no isser. She's not part of the kahal. Obviously, b'kahal askinan. So Elmo Rabbi gives a different approach. He says a different answer. He says, Kigayin shenafalai. We're talking about where a woman fell to this yavam, and thus there was a zika. Well, it was soif nifza. He only became b'tzua daka later on. Oh, now you have to do chalitza to remove the zika. You're right, she's a chiv alav. And if it was chiv alav, so he said, what are you talking about? What are you doing chalitza? You're doing not even the parsha of chalitza. You like chiva krisis. Kiva holds mamza would come from chiv alav just like chiva krisis, and therefore the Gemara equates chiv alav to chiva krisis over kiva. And we know chiva krisis no mitzvah of yim at all. They could go scot-free. So what's his chaltzin? Oh, because there was an accident, he only became a tzudaka, he had an operation procedure that went wrong, only after that there was already a zika. So the zika is already pre-existing. So you have to remove the zika, and that won't remove it retroactive. Problem is, Amalei Abai disagrees. He says, no. Why? Well, let the Isra Petzul come along, which only came, let's say, a month after his brother passed away, and should push away the mitzvah Sev Yibum. Because Milik didn't we learn the Mishnah later on, Kov Testament Aleph, this is in Perek Beis Shammai. When you have a Gedolah, you have a woman that's an adult, that falls in front of the Yavam, who's married to her younger sister that's a minor. As we'll see over there's a big discussion, what should we do in that situation? Because ultimately that the Yavam's marriage to the sister is only rabbinic, because she's a minor. But now the adult sister falls for him because his brother was married to the older sister. So he says, look, if the younger sister decides to recluse herself from this marriage, then she does, and then the older sister, obviously, you could do yibum. Then you wait until the younger sister who's married to the yavam becomes an adult, and then automatically the older sister, who's the yavam, will be removed because it's his wife's sister, which we know there's no mitzvah yibum by a wife's sister because she's an Arab. Oh, says the Gemara, says Abaya, Alma, so you see from that Mishnah, that the Isra of the wife's sister comes along vidochi, and it pushes away, even though at the time of the Nefila she was fit for Yibum, because at that time his wife was a minor, so biblically she was a regular Yevama, and still it pushes away the mitzvah of Yibum. So Chanami says the same thing over here. Let the Isra Petu, which came afterwards, push it away. Just like over there, the Isra Achisisha came afterwards. What's the difference? So Elam Rabbi Yisrael says a different approach. That really, no, he was already pre-existing a Petzua, and only then did his brother die and she fell for you. You said, but Rabbi Kiva holds Chiva Labn is like Chiva Krisis. So he's a Petzua Daka, which is a Chiva Lab, it should be just like Chiva Krisis. So what are you even saying? What's this Choltzin of Siddur Sodom? There's no Choltzin, she goes scot-free. No. Hi Tana, this Tana of the Mishnah that we're saying is Rabbi Kiva, Hach Tana de Rabbi Kiva. It's a specific Tana of Rabbi Kiva that says, the Amar, in Perek Achelitz, the Yevimta and the Mem Testament Aleph, that he says, what's a mamzer? It's mechiv lavin de she'er. It's specific negative prohibition. It's a negative prohibition that is of a relative, which has the isser of lo yavai. That would have a mamzer. That would create a child a mamzer, and hence that's the chiv lavin. That's a chiv krisis. But mechiv lavin created from a generic negative prohibition, lo have a mamzer. That would not create a child that's a mamzer. Meaning, as Rashi points out, not like Reb Simai, who says in Ksubas Daf Yomi Beis that Rabbi Kiva made a mamzer from every chiv lavin except Amalekan Gadol, because the Torah says lo yikach and lo yichal, which is regarding chilul, but it would not make a mamzer. But from all the regular chiv lavin, even when there's no relationship, the child would be a mamzer. Of that, the Gemara is saying no, we're going like a different time than Rabbi Kiva, who holds it's only specifically by chiv lavin of she'er. And here, where the chiv lavin is not of a she'er, it's not a relative negative prohibition, meaning it's a generic of Soris, of Krei Shavcha, of Petzua Daka, that would not make a child a mamzer. That chivla is not a chiv creases, and therefore that does not preclude this woman from chalitza. Can't do yibam, obviously, because there's an isser, but that's why you can have chalitza. But the Gemara asks, but why? You're telling me that a sris is going to do chalitza? But the Gemara wonders, even if it had a shasa kaisher, but ikri kan lahakim la'achim v'shem. What does it help me that Rabbi Kiva says, oh, sris adam, you're right, although he can't have children, but there was a shasa kaisher. At some point in his life, before this accident happened, he was able to have children. Who cares? But lahakim la'achim v'shem, the pasuk says, what's the point of yibum? Is to go ahead and create a child. And even though he had a shasa kaisher, but he can't have one right now, so what does it help me? Rava says, I'll disprove that logic that you're telling me. Why? Because Imkain, if that's the case, that an original, meaning he is a lahakam la'achav shem yid, right now he can't, that doesn't make a difference. Because if you would tell me that the original viability is insignificant, because at the time of death he's not fit, but then if that's the case, that means there's no woman that's ever fit for Yibum. Why? Because you're never going to have a woman that her husband does not become a stris chama, meaning someone who from natural means is not able to have children, 1 moment before he dies. Because the afflictions of death weaken him to such an extent that when he died, he was a stris himself. Rather we say, no, since originally the husband was someone that could have children, so therefore there is an element of liyamach shmai that his wife deserves chalitza. So you're also on lahakam lachem shem, it also doesn't make a difference. Meaning the Gemara is equating the mess and the brother. That the purpose is obviously if he was always a stress, you would never have yibum because it's only if he was able to have. But the moment he dies, he's already not capable of having children. Okay, why are we doing yibum? No, we say meikara he was able to. So here also the yavam is the same thing. Although right now he's not. Meikara he was. That's the logic he's coming back with.
This has to be that from the time of the Yibum.
Right, and the Gemara somehow understands to say that at the time of the Yibum is also when that guy dies. When that guy dies, what's the Hakam al Hashem? Was he was a stress. No, when he died also right now. Right now, the whole point is to take over. The person would have, if he would have lived, he would have have children. And now he's taking over. Right now when he died, he wasn't able to have children. So what's the point of doing Yibum? He was not able to have. That's what the Gemara understands to say also. I right now, yeah, but before I was able to. So the Gemara equates the two of them. But then the Gemara says, if that's the case, so then the Rabbi Eliezer, according to Rabbi Eliezer, Peruka de Rava Pirchi, and that is because most definitely we do see from every single person who dies that Shas HaKosher, that there was a viability, is something. So why is Rabbi Eliezer saying in that Mishnah that he disagrees with Rabbi Kiva and the old Sris Adam cannot do Chalitza? Because he holds Shas HaKosher is not effective that you had before. But what do you mean? Most definitely we see that a person who's dying, he's a Srisis that doesn't have a refuah. Because if you recall, what was the Svar Rabbi Eliezer in our Mishnah that permits a Sris Chama l'shitasai? It's because Sris Chama could have a healing. But someone who's dying, that Srisis cannot be healed. And even so, we do Yibum to the wife of every single person who dies because of the Shas HaKosher from before. So what does Rabbi Eliezer do with the Svar of Abaye explaining Rabbi Kiva? Seems it's a good point. Says the Gemara, no, it's not a good point. Why not? Because Hasam over there, Chishusa da'aschilabeh. This that you're saying, that the moment he's dying, he's not able to have children, says, the way Rashi explains it, it's not true. He's just weak. It's not Srisus. It's just the death is weakening him. It's not that he's not capable of having children. It's not a saldas. It's not something with his reproductive organ, is their reproductive system. He's able to have children. He's just so weak that he can't have a child, and therefore it's not true. You don't see the svara of Shas HaKosher in the one who died, and therefore that would not refute Rabbi Eliezer, and he can still hold that it's not dependent on Shas HaKosher. It's dependent on if there's refuah or not. Thank you to anything for those things.